Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Vinstitute number 8. My name's Moss Sherkogel, and this time, instead of staring at my computer for 3 minutes, waiting for confirmation that the stream is going, I'm just going to assume that the stream is going. So, if anybody has anything to the contrary to say, if maybe you can't hear me or you can't see me, please just post something in the comments, or just telephone me on my personal number if you have that, and just let me know that it's all gone catastrophically wrong, and then I'll just keep standing here and talking. So welcome everybody to the Virtual Vinstitute. This is, of course, the 8th iteration of the Virtual Vinstitute. We have taken it through different towns. We have taken it from location to location. And you know what the saying is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. Which is why every single Virtual Vinstitute has been different. Except for this one. This is the very first time that we're really doing things in the same way that we were doing them last time. I am back here in my familiar window seat, overlooking the front entranceway of Namara Seaside Spa Resort and Conference Center. I like to get my plugs out of the way before I start talking about wine. Namara has been incredibly gracious in letting me camp out here for the last month and a half. Not literally, I don't live in this room. I go to a tool shed when I'm not here. But they have been, as I said, very gracious, letting us record this video series here in their conference rooms. They are a pretty remarkable spa and resort, a pretty fantastic company, incredibly eco-friendly. I think I mentioned in a previous live stream that a few years back they sunk about $6 million into renovations, putting in entirely, water-based paints, soy insulation, renewable gas. They're the only resort on Vancouver Island that uses renewable gas. Anyways, they're just they're very friendly. They're very pleasant. They're very admirable, and they're a very islandy resort. So I'm very happy to have been doing these tastings here. The next video tasting that I do will likely be in a different location because I will at that point be living down in the Saanich Peninsula. In fact, I have a home that I'm ready to move into, which is about 1 block away from the Church and State facility in Brentwood Bay. And, oh, look at that. It says Church and State right there. Isn't that funny? Anyways, the point is I will be setting up a new location to do this live stream, so thank you again to Namara for letting me do them up to this point. This is likely going to be the last time that I'm here. Well, we have a lot of things to talk about tonight, so I'm going to try not to mess around too much. This is kind of the mid-season finale, when your favorite television show takes a break because one of the actors wants to go on vacation, and so they stop on episode 15, they do a big cliffhanger, and then you have to wait for a month or two until it comes back on the air. And then when it comes back on the air, they completely disregard the big cliffhanger, and everything was kind of, it was all a dream, or the guy had the key in the pocket, and he has nothing to worry about. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do right here, because with me moving, I'm going to need to take a 3-week break from these live streams, so we're going to miss an extra week. We're not going to come back until second week in September. So this is the mid-season finale. We're going to pack it full of content. It's going to be, it's going to be a lot of stuff. So what I want to do to begin is to give you a little bit of background that I have been woefully deficient in giving you up until this point, which is, what is France? What is it? Is it a country? Is it a continent? No, it's a country. It's part of the continent called Europe. And France is where a lot of wine comes from. Or, more relevant for our interests, it's where a lot of wine grapes come from, a lot of grapevines. You see, we have been, as North American vineyard pioneers, bringing over French wine grapes for decades and decades. and integrating them into our climate and landscape so that we can grow the grapes that are best known from French wine. Now, in British Columbia, we are extremely fond of experimentation, throwing spaghetti at the wall, and so we bring in German grapes, we bring in Austrian grapes, we bring in Hungarian grapes, we bring in French, we bring in Spanish, we bring in Italian, and we bring in hybrid grapes that were designed for New World countries and hybrid grapes that were actually designed for British Columbia. There's a lot to look at and a lot to explore, but I wanted to do a really quick overview about some of the important territories in France, and I want to relate that back to what we are talking about tonight, which is Rhone Valley whites. To understand Rhone Valley whites, you should understand the Rhone Valley. And I'm not going to get into too deep of detail. I'm really just going to point at a map and say some things quickly. So if you're interested in this, there's a lot of great ways to learn, and not the least of which is just Wikipedia or Wine Folly, which is my favorite wine website. So in France, this is France, by the way, if that was not clear before, we have several different wine territories. Now, this is not all of the wine territories. There are more of them, but they're not ones that we care about from a British Columbian standpoint, because the wines that we're interested come from these locations that I've marked here. The most famous of the French territories is, I've written BX for Bordeaux, because it ends in an X. Bordeaux is where we see things like Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. I've got a tasting of Cabernet Franc coming up, which I'm incredibly excited about because it is my single favorite red wine grape. All of these things come from the Bordeaux region of France. It's also where you see things like Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon coming in the white wines. More Sauvignon Blanc comes from the Loire Valley as well, if you move just a little bit up the map. And in the Loire Valley, you also see things like Chenin Blanc, which is another fun wine that people like Inniskillen play around with down in the South Okanagan. But mostly we're looking here at the big reds from Bordeaux and the Sauv Blanc, which spans that area and is a fairly popular grape in the Okanagan. Now, if we move over to the right-hand side of this map, which is, of course, the east side of France, we have Champagne, this little splotch up in the top, which is a cooler climate, which is why they make primarily sparkling wines. You can make good sparkling wines in cool climates, but to do still red wines, let's say, you tend to need more heat, which is why you see places like Bordeaux further down, further south, closer to the equator, even by just, increments of 100 kilometers or so. It does make a difference, and you wind up getting more heat. And then over here, still in kind of the cool zone, right over by the edge of Germany, you've got Belgium, you've got Luxembourg, and you've got Germany all bordering France up here. We have AL, this is the Alsace region. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing aromatic whites. We were looking at things like Riesling, we were looking at things like Gewürztraminer. These crisp, clean, a little bit higher acid aromatic whites tend to come from Alsace, and so we're talking about wines that are crisp. We're talking about wines that are clean, that are fresh, that have that real citrus tone to them. This is a common feature of wines that are coming from the northern areas of France, where you have slightly cooler temperatures. But as we start to move down south, by the way, this is Burgundy, where you have Pinot Noir, Beaujolais, where you have Gamay Noir. Remember the Gamay Noir episode that we did? Well, that's where it comes from. But as you move further south, you start to get hotter and hotter. Like I said, we've got Bordeaux over here, where you can grow some really big, beefy reds like Petit Verdot, Malbec. But then this is the important one for us today. This is Rhone. This is the Rhone Valley. And it's kind of a couple different squiggles that all go together. The last time that I did this virtual Vinstitute tasting, I talked about Rhone Reds. I talked about Syrah, I talked about Grenache, I talked about Mourvedre. These are red wine grapes, particularly Syrah, that come from this area in the Rhone Valley. Today we're going to be talking about Viognier, we're going to be talking about Marsanne, and we're going to be talking about Roussanne. And these are extremely different grapes than the sort that you find up in the Alsace region, or even the Chardonnay that is popularized in areas like Burgundy or into Champagne to make sparkling wine there. And it's very different as well from the Sauv Blanc that we get coming out of the Loire Valley. And a lot of it is climate. A lot of it is chalked up to climate. Viognier, Marsanne, and Roussanne are three white wine grapes that all grow particularly well in warm, dry climates, especially Marsanne and Roussanne, which are very finicky. They're very tender, very delicate, very, very fussy grapes that do not handle humidity or cool temperatures well. You really need to grow them somewhere like the Rhone Valley where you're getting that Spanish heat. Keep in mind, this right here is the border to Spain. You've got Spain and Portugal, and just on the other side of the Rhone Valley is the border to Italy, right? So you've got areas of the Mediterranean that would typically be classified as hot, right? You think of Spain and you think of Italy as being hot climates for growing grapes. Very different than northeast or northwest France, where it's much, much cooler. So this is just to kind of situate things, give you a little bit of locality, understand where these grapes are coming from, and maybe also understand why they are popular grapes to grow in the South Okanagan, in Oliver and Osoyoos, where in a similar comparison to France, we have in the South Okanagan a rare ecosystem that allows for dry, hot climate. And I say rare because most of British Columbia does not share that same ecosystem. There are little pockets, little rain shadows here and there where you get sort of patches of desertification of near desert conditions or arid conditions where you can grow these hotter climate reds. But few are better than Oliver and Osoyoos, I would argue, partially because I'm being paid by the Oliver Osoyoos Winery Association. I want to say one other thing before I move on from the map, which is the bottles look different on different parts of the map. Sorry, I'm moving around too much. I know the frame rate is terrible on this live stream, so I'm going to try to hold still and just move my mouth. Makes it a little bit easier to watch, I think. Less motion sickness. So, the bottles look different. The bottles look different when you're in different areas. Let me demonstrate. Today, we are going to be looking at and talking about all wines from the Rhone Valley, and you'll notice that they all look the same. They're all the same shape. They're all the sort of pear-shaped bottle, right? This is a shape of bottle that is known as the Burgundy bottle. It's known as the Burgundy bottle because it's what Pinot Noir and Chardonnay both come in. And those are the wines that come from Burgundy. But you'll notice as well that this is from the Rhone Valley, and they're all kind of on the east side here. In that kind of middle east to southeast section of France, all the wine in this area comes in these pear-shaped bottles. If you move across the map and you go to the west side, if you look at the Loire Valley, if you look down into the Bordeaux Valley, you see a different shape of bottle. And I brought in an example here from a previous tasting. Here from last week is the empty now bottle of Sunrock Shiraz, which comes in a Bordeaux bottle. This is the sort of square-shouldered, straight up and down bottle that is popularized by wines like Merlot, Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, and also where you tend to see things like Sauvignon Blanc fall into. Now, I brought this wine deliberately because this is Shiraz, which is actually Syrah, which is actually from the Rhone Valley, which should be in a pear-shaped bottle. But it's not. And that is to illustrate the fact that bottle shape actually doesn't matter. And when you're in the new world of wine, when you're in a place like Australia or California, Washington State, when you're in British Columbia or Ontario and you are making wine, you can put it in whatever shape of bottle you want to. And at Sunrock, they said, yeah, let's stick it in one of those straight bottles, one of the Bordeaux bottles. That'll be fun. Also, we'll name it the Australian word for Syrah. Hilarious. We'll put it in a bottle that doesn't match the grape, and we'll call it a name that doesn't match the grape. Haha, I'm teasing, Sunrock. You're great. You make delicious wine, but you make strange choices in terms of your branding. And you're allowed to because there's nobody forcing you to use certain shapes and sizes of bottles. But if we were in France, oh, there would be people forcing us to use certain shapes and sizes of bottles. They're very strict and they're very rigid. And there is a certain consumer expectation that a lot of people still accommodate, right? Every now and then you get a winery like Sunrock or Maverick, who we talked about last time. Maverick just sticks everything in the same Burgundy bottle, which I kind of respect because they don't have to mess with different shapes and sizes when they're ordering glass. But at the same time, you tend to expect that your Rhone wines, your Rhone reds, your Rhone whites, and your Burgundy reds and whites are going to be in this shape of bottle. That's just, as I said, consumer expectation. But then what happens if we move a little bit further up north? If we go into the Alsace region, right? You're thinking, okay, well, it's east, right? So it'll be the dumpy bottle. Totally the opposite. Again, I've brought in something from a previous session. This here is what we call the Hawk bottle. And the Hawk bottle is basically the sort of cool climate Alsatian or Germanic style of white wine bottle. This is what your Riesling comes in. Here's the old Inkemeep Quumpt Riesling that we tasted a month ago in the aromatic white session. So your Rieslings, your Gewürztraminers, they're all going to come in this shape of bottle. Pinot Blanc is a funny one because it tends to come in your sort of dumpy pear-shaped bottle, even though it's in the Alsace region. This is a funny territory right here. But the point is, you get this division that roughly teaches you a little bit about geography. You've got certain shape of bottle, tall square shoulder here. You've got certain shape of bottle, I'll include a bit of Alsace, your rounded, pear-shaped, and then you have certain shape of bottle, you're very tall, skinny. I've left Champagne out because they're very insular, they're very proprietary, they've got their own thing going on, and the Champagne bottle has its own kind of special curve. It's a little bit like the Burgundy bottle, but it's different because, you know, French city-states, they've all got their own ideas about things. All right. I just really wanted to tell you guys that. I wanted to tell you about bottle shapes. And now I'm going to tell you about wine. I've got Facebook messages popping up everywhere. Let me get those out of the way. We're going to start with the most popular and common of the Rhone whites, which is, everybody say it along with me, Viognier. Viognier. A lot of people say this one, well, let's just say some people are nervous to try to say this wine out loud. Even more so than Gewürztraminer, I find. With Gewürztraminer, you just fall into it head first like a ditch. You know, it's just Gerber, whatever. But with this one right here, people get shy. I notice that when I'm selling wine, people will point at it and say, that one over there. And so, you know, it looks like it's pronounced Viognier or Wagner, as some people very deliberately proclaim, but it is Viognier. And it is a grape that, quite frankly, a lot of BC wine consumers may not have even heard of 10 years ago. It was barely on the map at that time in terms of BC production, but it has become rapidly more popular. And for very good reasons. Viognier is an absolutely delightful and delicious grape. It is, like I was saying when talking about my map, it is kind of antithetical. It is kind of the opposite to these cool climate, crisp, aromatic whites. Your Rieslings, your Gewürztraminers, where you have, often big, bold, intense aromatics, sometimes belied by a bit of a sharp edge. Gewürztraminer may be a bad example because it's a little bit sweeter on the palate, softer on the palate, but Riesling, Pinot Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, right? These are grapes that stand on the opposite end of the spectrum to Viognier, because Viognier is, instead of being sharp and crisp and clean with high levels of acid, Viognier is instead soft. It is round, it is gentle, it is fairly plump, and it carries with it a certain oiliness on the palate that I think makes it a fantastic food pairing wine, and also makes it a really brilliant blending wine. We have, in fact, tried Viognier on this live stream series before, and it was mixed in with a little bit of Syrah last time. And it's because Viognier is such a good blending wine that you can put it together with other whites or even other reds. And the Viognier itself tends to just accentuate and highlight the characteristics of those other wines. Instead of just showing its own taste, it is such a good team player. It will take on the characteristics of the other wines, and it will enhance and amplify their own tones. This is what we tend to find. And so we use Viognier as a blending wine for structure, for texture, and also as that amplifying influence. But what does it taste like on its own? Well, it can be fairly floral. It has a tendency to be floral, to sometimes have a bit of a honeyed tone to it. Sometimes it'll have stone fruit, by which I mean peach, nectarine, apricot, and it can have sort of a richness or a creaminess that can be enhanced or amplified, again, by the winemaking style. Now, this Viognier that I have right here, this is one of the favorites in the valley. This is from Lariana. And if you're not familiar with Lariana, then I guess you could be excused, because they're very small and they're pretty new. But you have no more excuse now. You really should go out and try some of their wine, because Dan and Carol, the owners of Lariana, have done a really magnificent job of taking a small vineyard, only 10 acres, tucked down into a corner of a Soyuz that, I don't know, probably people didn't even realize was still in Canada. It is directly on the United States border, and they have turned it into a production facility for some incredibly fine boutique wine. They only make, I was going to say, I suddenly realized that I don't know how much wine they make. I was gonna say 500 cases. I think when they first started, they were making 500 cases. But then I realized that they made 400 cases just of this wine, I believe. So maybe they make more than that now. Maybe they make 1,000 or so. But the point is, they do not make very much. Sorry, Dan and Carol. You'll have to tell me how much wine you make sometime. But they make absolutely brilliant wine. Originally, they were growing grapes that were being sold to other very reputable Okanagan wineries, and then they started to go into business for themselves, producing their own wine. If you go to visit them, you will first have to drive to the American border. When you are staring an American border official in the eyes, you then turn sharply left, as if you are running away from the border, as if you have something desperately to hide, and you'll drive down a side road, and you'll go what seems to be behind the border, and then you'll curl around and get to, Dan's cellar. The tasting room itself is inside of the wine production cellar. So you go right in there next to the tanks, next to cases of wine that are all boxed up. And as the season goes on, there's fewer and fewer and fewer cases as they sell out of everything very quickly. And you get to do a tasting right there in amidst all the other accoutrements, everything that helps make the wine what they are, which is a really fun experience. It's really neat and it's really unique, and there's not many places in the Okanagan where you can taste right inside the cellar like that. Right now, they are sold out of just about everything. They still have their absolutely phenomenal red blend, which is well worth looking at. If you do happen to be in the Okanagan and you want to try some of their wine, book a reservation to get in there. They're really, really small, and so you need to kind of call ahead or book online on their website to make sure that you actually are able to get in. But they're also offering free shipping on any cases of 12 bottles or more. So let's try some of the Lariana Viognier. Beautifully clear, very clear to start with right here. A little bit of coloration. So one of the things, that's good. One of the things that makes Lariana fun and different, something that more and more wineries are starting to adopt, and that Dan and Carol had started working with, right out of the gates, is concrete. They have a concrete egg in their winery, and again, when you go for a tasting, you can stand right next to it and try your wine. You can touch the concrete egg while you are tasting your wine. Actually, I don't know. I would ask Dan if you're allowed to touch the concrete egg while you're tasting, but theoretically. And this wine is produced in concrete. About 3/4 of this juice is put into concrete to mature, while the remaining quarter is put into a single French oak barrel. So they have the one barrel, then they have the sort of 3-to-1 ratio, the 75% of the wine in concrete. They allow that to mature in there for about 5 months. A little less than half a year, and then they take it out and they blend the two together to get this finished wine. By the way, as this is opening up, I'm talking, but I'm smelling here. Like so many wines, you open it up and you're not really giving it a fair shake initially because it hasn't had time to breathe, to get a bit of air, to start to really exert itself and show itself off. But now, this is kicking in, and this is reminding us why this is such a well-regarded wine. John Schreiner, one of Canada's finest wine critics and wine writers, once said that this was, kind of the #1 Viognier. This was the Viognier in British Columbia. He said that a couple of years ago, and I think it's a really fair assessment to make because amazing complexity on the nose. As it's aerating, I'm just getting more and more and more. I'm getting stone fruit. I'm getting these tones of sort of peachy elements, right? Smells of peach, but then there's a nuttiness in there as well. I'm getting floral tones. I'm getting white flower. I'm getting orange. Viognier is one of the rare white wines that can really smell or taste like oranges. You can get a little bit in your Marsanne. Your Rhone whites can kind of bring that out. Maybe a little bit in Roussanne. I find it more in Marsanne personally. Viognier. This is excluding things like orange muscat, which is pretty deliberately orange, but this has a beautiful fragrance of oranges coming in. And now that I've kind of clued into the oranges, that's all I'm getting. It's coming in really, really strong now. This is what makes a nuanced wine really fun. You can be smelling it and you can be picking out new things, and it goes through these waves, right? Initially, I was getting a lot of the peach, and then I was getting this nuttiness mixed together with the floral tones. Now I'm getting the oranges, and it just goes through these cycles of kind of coming around. Now I'm getting the floral again. I'm gonna go ahead and taste it. So where's my my sacrificial water bottle, as usual. 3 times in a row, I keep failing to actually bring a spittoon with me. Not many people own a spittoon. You'd think that I would make use of the fact that I am one of the few, but you always want to take one sip to kind of prime your mouth, to kind of coat it, to get things ready. Then you go in for a second sip to really understand the flavor of the wine. the first sip is never really enough to fully comprehend it, and sometimes the first sip can be harsh. If you're tasting a high acid wine, it can come in a little bit biting. If you're tasting a high sweetness wine, it can be cloying. High tannin can be, kind of rough and raspy. But I mean, this wine tastes good right away. This is the first wine that I've had of the day, and it tastes great, which is really saying something. A lot of wines would not show so well on the first sip. Mm. Magnificent texture and mouthfeel. Like I said, Viognier has a bit of oiliness to it. There's a bit of a thickness naturally in the grape, and it tends to have a higher level of pH than some other comparable white wine grapes, which means that even though it has a little bit of acid, it's not a high acid grape. It's a medium acid grape. It'll have a little higher pH. And what pH does is it buffers out and it balances the impact of acidity. And so if you have a high pH level, it makes you feel the acid less. If you have low pH, there's no barrier and you feel all of that acid. So right here, with the higher level of pH and that sort of medium level of acid, it's coming through really soft and really round. Now, is that enhanced by the use of the concrete egg? Yeah, we would argue that it is. Some people ask, what does concrete do? Those people are smart because they're asking questions, and you should always ask questions about things you don't understand. Concrete does a couple of different things, but the primary reason that people use concrete is for micro-oxidization. Imagine, if you will, the walls of a concrete vessel are dotted with tiny little pores, little holes, right? Bubbles, air bubbles. Concrete is not smooth and solid necessarily, unless it's very carefully produced and polished down. But instead, it has these little pockets. And that means that pockets of air, bubbles of air, get trapped inside, and then they bubble back out into the wine, and they effectively oxidize it while it is being matured. And so, this particular style of producing wine can result in wines that are softened, that are rounded, that have more texture kind of brought out with them. These are the impacts of micro-oxidization. And so the egg does, I think it does wonders for this wine in terms of enhancing that texture and also just bringing out that wonderful fruitiness. On the palate, I'm getting more of that orange, I'm getting more of the peach, getting wonderful fruit tones. Then I go back into the nose and I'm getting more of that floral. This is a wonderful wine made by a wonderful producer, and it is a great representative of a wonderful grape overall. That's my opinion. Really good. Really, really good. I love Viognier. I love this Viognier. They've got a cute little symbol on the top too, which is like, the Lariana symbol. It's two people standing around a basket press. That's how you know small operation. Basket press. I'll tell you about presses sometime. I probably won't tell you about presses sometime. It's boring. Next up, we have Church and State wines. Church and State has long been one of the better known wineries in British Columbia. It was started by the Pullen family, who started a little estate in Brentwood Bay, which is where I'm going to be moving very shortly. And then they stretched out and expanded their estate into the Okanagan. So it is, one of the only BC wineries that has kind of multiple estates, multiple locations, where it doesn't just grow grapes. I mean, plenty of wineries will have vineyards in multiple locations. You'll get an Oliver winery like Road 13 that gets some of its grapes from the Similkameen Valley, or you'll have a place like Jackson Triggs or Inniskillen, where they'll have multiple vineyards kind of stretched out throughout the Okanagan Valley. But Church and State is interesting because it actually has two full facilities. It has a Church and State winery with a tasting bar, with a production facility here in Brentwood Bay in Vancouver Island. And then it also has a full-on production facility and tasting bar out in Oliver. And so you have some really interesting wines because there are grapes and influences that are coming from the different areas. And I have it from the manager of the Oliver facility and the winemaker that they're looking at turning the Saanich facility into maybe something that is focused towards sparkling wines. I think that may or may not be privileged information that I just blew, so I'm really sorry. But anyways, it's very neat for them to have these multiple locations that they are working with and to be able to make different styles of wine. And their winemaker, Arnaud, he travels back and forth between the two facilities, the head winemaker there. And they do some really exciting things. And something that I really like about Second Chapter Wines is that they like their Rhone Valley varietals, which means that they also produce things like Marsanne. That's what we are talking about right now. This wine is the 2017 Marsanne, and this is a really cool wine because Marsanne is a really cool grape. Now, have you ever heard of Marsanne before? Of course you haven't, because who grows Marsanne? It's grown in the Rhone Valley, yes, but unless you have been to Hermitage yourself and actually gone into one of these little crews, one of these little areas, and tasted the native wine there, or unless you work for one of the 5 vineyards in BC that actually grows Marsanne, you've probably never even heard of it. It is one of the least popular grapes in BC. In terms of the category of grapes that people actually like to work with, it's way down there at the bottom. There was only about 7 acres of Marsanne planted in British Columbia about 5 years ago. Maybe there's a little bit more now. For all I know, there's maybe less, because it is a finicky grape. I mentioned that at the beginning of this program, that it is a grape that is very difficult to work with. It really, really likes dry, low humidity, warm conditions. Doesn't do very well with cool climate. It's very vigorous, so it grows lots and lots of fruit. But unfortunately, it produces, and I say this from direct experience, it produces these fat clusters of grapes that are kind of overstuffed, kind of like the rings of a CBC gem logo, just absolutely clustered with grapes. And they ripen in very uneven fashion if you're not really careful how you prune the vines. I have seen Marsanne plants where some of them are green and some of them are brown and overripe and ready to fall off, all on one grapevine. And that means that either you're doing multiple passes through, picking a little bit today, picking a little bit tomorrow, picking a little bit next week, or you're just taking less volume overall. Point is, it's a bit of a nasty grape to work with, but it produces a wine that is very unique and very distinct, and I think really worth working for. In the Rhone Valley, they like to blend the red wines. They blend the Syrah with the Grenache, with the Mourvèdre, that's your GSM. They also like to blend together the white wines. They blend together the Viognier, the Roussanne, the Marsanne, that's your VRM. And when you see Marsanne from British Columbia, you tend to see it blended. There are a few people that do a Viognier Marsanne blend, and more power to them. You should look out any Viognier Marsanne blend you can find, and you should buy cases of it. So many cases of whatever Viognier Marsanne blend you can find. But other people do Viognier Roussanne Marsanne, all 3 of them. This one right here, this is just pure Marsanne on its own, and that is rare because Marsanne is a quiet grape. It is pale in comparison with the voluminous nature of Viognier. Viognier is full, it is rich, it is a little bit more powerful and assertive, whereas Marsanne is a little bit quiet, it's a little bit shy, and it takes a little bit of coaxing to come out of its shell. What is good at coaxing things out of its shell? Viognier. So when you put Viognier and Marsanne together, the Viognier helps the Marsanne express itself. The Viognier takes on and amplifies the characteristics of the Marsanne and boosts them. So what do you get from the Marsanne? What's the purpose of the Marsanne? Well, the Marsanne is a little bit, almost a little bit resinous and woodsy sometimes. You get this this fun kind of sort of forest floor tea leaf tone from Marsanne. It's a little bit herbal. It's a little bit floral. And this right here, I mean, this is almost like I don't want to say potpourri because that gives these really exaggerated perfume tones, but there is a essence of dried flower and dried orange peel. Imagine sort of Christmas orange, you know, you've got your sort of cloves and dried orange peel. It is not strong, it's not extreme, but it is incredibly unique, and it gives a character that is so distinct and just so delightful. I mean, it's Marsanne is a grape that I like a lot because I just don't think that there's any other grape that's like it. I think that it is totally distinct. You get a light hint of oak there. And Marsanne is fun because it naturally has, like I said, a little bit of a woodsy taste to it. And so when you apply oak in the winemaking, you're not adding a flavor of wood. You are enhancing the existing flavor, right? You know, sometimes Marsanne will taste like it's been oaked when it hasn't been oaked, or it'll taste like it's been more oaked than it actually has been, because that's kind of part of the grape. That's just that's coming in naturally. So this right here, this is about 20% new oak barrels, 80% neutral oak barrels. It's been in there for 8 months. 8 months on the lees, on the depleted yeast cells, which is kind of helping enrich the texture again. All of these wines have featured enrichment, as opposed to being made like spearheads, like your Rieslings, like your Alsatian wines, or your Loire Sauv Blancs, right? You know, instead of getting that clean, crisp snap, all of these wines have had an enhancement of texture to round them out and make them more full, more rich, and build up that mid-palate texture. Again, I get nuttiness on this. I had it a bit on the nose of the Viognier, but then the palate was very bright, juicy fruit. This is bringing in a lot more nuttiness. I mean, I kind of want to just take the Marsanne and the Viognier and mix them together and see, you know, what you get, because they're two grapes that complement each other so well. And and again, it's soft. It is also low acid, a little higher pH, and so it comes across very mellow, very warm. Fantastic. So this is the Church and State 2017 Marsanne. A really great wine. You can try this at the tasting bar in either facility. You can go to whatever Church and State suits you best, and you can try some wine. Reservations, you do need to make reservations. I mentioned this about a month ago when I was talking about Gamay Noir, that the winery Vinstitute is doing a really cool reservation system where you book in for a tasting, you get given a glass that says Vinstitute on it, and then you do your tasting and you get to keep the glass afterwards. Church and State is doing the same thing. You are able to taste, get a Church and State glass, and then take that glass home with you. which is a really cool souvenir if you are visiting the Okanagan. It's really worth taking a visit to Church and State to try some of their wines and to get your cool commemorative Church and State glass. But again, if you cannot do that, then join one of their mailing lists. Watch them on social media, and they frequently do free shipping promotions where you can get the wine sent directly to yourself. And if you join their wine club, you get all kinds of fun benefits, including access to wines that you would not otherwise be permitted to get your hands on, at least not yet. You get these kind of early releases. Okay, Marsanne. 2017 Marsanne. Really fun wine. So different, so specific. Gives you something that you just do not get from any other grape. All right. This is wine number 3. Should be the end of the program after this. I'm ahead of time. Usually this is like a 70, 75 minute thing. What am I going to do to fill the last 15 minutes? Am I just going to dance? Am I just going to sing songs from the Moana soundtrack, which my kids listen to every day, nonstop, while I'm trying to work? What can I say except you're welcome? All right. This is 2017 Roussanne from second chapter. Couple fun things here. Couple of fun pieces of synchronicity. Roussanne is the partner grape to Marsanne. It is similar to Marsanne in many ways, partially in its fragility and fussiness. Viognier is pretty equitable. It'll work in a lot of different conditions. It'll grow in a lot of different circumstances. But Roussanne, it's a lot like Marsanne. It is tough to work with. I have heard vineyard operators say that it is harder to work with than Marsanne, and Marsanne is hard to work with. So, well, there you go. It is also a critical component of the 3 varietal blend, the VRM. It's the R. And what it brings is a brightness, a citrus tone, a little bit more acid than the Marsanne, and kind of a freshness that the Marsanne and the Viognier don't necessarily have on their own, right? Those are soft, mellow wines that are very rounded, give you something very introspective, but the Roussanne is a little bit racier. It brings in a little bit of pep, which is why some winemakers do not put it into their 3 varietal blend, making it a 2 varietal blend, because they don't want to overwhelm the Marsanne. If you want to highlight the Marsanne, you just do Viognier and Marsanne on its own. Because if you put in the Roussanne is going to zip it up. It's going to bring a little bit extra, which I would argue is not a bad thing. So, second chapter. Here's another little piece of synchronicity. If you're not familiar with second chapter was started by the Pullen family. Wait a minute. That's what I said about Church and State. Am I reading my notes wrong? No, this is just another winery that was also started by the Pullen family, particularly John Pullen. Church and State was started by I'm trying to get my thumb into the right spot right there. Church and State was started by the Pullen family, decades ago there, and a couple of years back, they sold the property. They sold Church and State, and they stepped back. And John, the son of the original founder, he maintained some of the vineyard that was owned by Church and State prior. He maintained some of the wine that had been produced, and he started a new winery. That's called Second Chapter, which is kind of a cheeky pun on the idea of church and state, right? Chapters, like chapters of a church. It's sort of a second chapter. As I said, cheeky pun. But Church and State is doing some absolutely magnificent wines, and second chapter is also doing some magnificent wines using some similar styles of grapes. So, think of it as whatever that thing is where a single-celled organism splits in two, and cell division, something like that. I don't know science, but the point is, you now have a brand new winery in the Okanagan. This is their first full proper year of operation, and they are making some absolutely spectacular wines. And if you're a fan of church and state wines, then I am sure that you will enjoy the wines of second chapter as well. This right here is Roussanne. And like I said, Roussanne is just that little extra zip. It brings that extra crispness and brightness, and a little bit of floral aromatics, a little bit of edge to the old Marsanne and Viognier combo. This is a wine that has been getting some incredible accolades so far, and I mean that both externally but also internally. I do a lot of talking to people within the wine industry, right? That's part of my gig. And this is a wine that has come up on several occasions where people have said, hey, have you tried the Church and State Roussanne? Because this wine is flippin' phenomenal. I was chatting with one executive member of the winery, sort of community, who was saying that this is the first wine that has had them really excited from Oliver and Osoyuz for more than a year. This is the first wine in ages that really just opened their eyes and made them go, holy smokes, this is incredible. You get a lot of sort of honeyed floral tones there on the nose. There's this sort of richness of the fruit that's that seems really sort of deep and plush. It's a little bit of tropical fruit. It's a little bit of, well, it's almost like very, very ripe apple. It's almost a little bit like mango. Maybe a little bit banana. But the point is, it is this enticing, exciting, juicy fruit tone that is mixed together with a floral nature that makes it, it isn't just a fruit bomb. There is nuance to it. And I think that's one of the things that makes this wine really exciting. You get some of the crispness, you get some of the brightness. Like I said, Roussanne tends to have a little bit more acid, a little more cleanness to it than your Marsanne, your Vio. It's a really nice wine. It is rich. It is full. This has also had, I think it was about 15% new oak, 85% neutral oak, kept in there for about 7 months. So once again, you have the oak enhancing the texture, and the wine does not lack for texture. It is full. It is round, but it has a little bit of brightness to it. You know, that's a good way to describe things like acid. Acid is a negative word. It's a word that doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like I'm promoting a wine when I say, oh, it has acid, right? That sounds sour, or that sounds volatile. But saying that a wine has brightness, that it has liveliness, that it has vigor, right? That is a good way to describe the impact of acid. The literal compound is acid, but the impact, the effect it has on the wine is liveliness. You get something that is bright and that is exciting. And this is both bright and exciting. You get more of that fruit coming in on the palate, but you also get a little bit of nuttiness. It's neat when you see the parallels between these grapes. I mean, they are all closely related. They're all grown in the same area. They all share certain, genetic similarities, but they are ultimately different grapes. And so it's still neat to see, okay, there's a little bit of nuttiness that mirrors what you see in the Marsanne, although it's much toned down here. In the same way that the Marsanne has some of the fruit that we're seeing here, albeit toned down in that case. They're really sort of, different sides of the same three-sided dice. It's not a real thing. The oak profile on this wine is really nice. It's, like I said before with the Marsanne, sometimes you can't always necessarily tell where the oak is. This wine right here, you're seeing a bit of the impact of the oak coming in as a little bit of tannin, a little bit of texture, and of that little hint of nuttiness. But if you're not a fan of an oaked Chardonnay, if you're not a fan of oaked white wine, this is an oaked white wine that you would love, because it has some of the effects of oak without showing off the oak. It doesn't scream oak. You have to kind of know what you're looking for to see it there. Wonderful, magnificent. I see in the chat that the Lariana Viognier is sold out. So sorry about that. Like I said, Lariana makes amazing wine, and boy does it ever go fast. So I'm afraid you missed your chance to get the 2018 Viognier. I'm afraid you missed your chance to get the 2019 Viognier. But boy oh boy, will you ever be excited for the 2020 Viognier when it comes out. Also, go to the Lariana website and look for where their wines are sold. They do have representation. They do get their wine out there into liquor stores, so it's entirely possible that maybe if you go to a boutique wine store that's near where you live, a little independent wine store, call them up and see if they have some of the Lariana Viognier, because you might be able to find some. You could be the last person to get the Lariana Viognier after the winery itself is all out. There you go. There's something to be excited about. So, like I said, usually I run this thing until about 8:15, but it's 7:56, and I'm all out of wine. I mean, these bottles are empty. So what am I going to do? What's this? Is it 2 more bottles of Church and State? Is it 2 bottles of Church and State Roussanne? It is! It is 2 bottles of Church and State Roussanne. The team at Church and State was kind enough to send me all the way here to Vancouver Island. It would have made a lot of sense if I had just picked it up in Brentwood Bay, but no, we did the shipping. They were kind enough to send me 2 bottles of kind of early preview, early access Roussanne. This is Roussanne that is not yet available unless you are part of their wine club. Remember what I said, that if you're part of the Church and State Wine Club, then you can get access, early access to wines that haven't been released to the public yet. Well, here's 2 good examples. So this is going to be fun because we're going to be able to do a little bit of a vertical. I just tasted 2017 Roussanne from the second chapter production, but this right here is 2018 Roussanne and 2019 Roussanne. So that means that today I get to do a vertical tasting. Does everybody understand what a vertical tasting is? A vertical tasting is when you take one wine from a single producer and you study it over multiple vintages. You look at different years. So doing 2017 and 2018, or doing 2018 and 2019 in this case, that's a little mini vertical. And if you do a horizontal tasting is when you look at one year, one vintage, so let's say 2017, and then you look at the same wine made by multiple producers. That is a horizontal tasting. A horizontal tasting is about understanding the differences between wineries and also understanding the nuances of one season, right? You take a year that you like and you study the different wines that are made in that year. A vertical tasting is about seeing the ever-changing kind of evolution of a particular winery, seeing the way that one vineyard can change its production across different seasons, seeing how different years impact it. But it's also a neat way to see the way that wine ages in the bottle. There's no better way than a vertical to understand the way that aged wine tastes. If you want to know how different your 2013 bottle of Syrah from Road 13 is, then you want to look at a 2013 bottle of Syrah, you want to look at a 2014 and a 15. Or maybe even jump a few years, do your 13, your 15, get a 17. You want to always usually start, you want to always start from the most recent wines. No, I said that wrong. I got so confused by saying almost always, maybe. You want to start from the oldest wines. You want to start from the oldest wines and you want to work your way towards the most recent. And the reason is that the older wines tend to be softer, they tend to be a little bit rounder, and then when you move towards the more recent wines, they tend to get livelier, brighter, more tannic if it's a red wine. And so you don't want to overwhelm your palate with that, so you always start with your oldest wine and then you work your way up towards your newer stuff. But the point is, if you want to understand the way that a wine has aged, you look at some of its younger counterparts, and that's going to give you the best representation. So that's why a vertical tasting is a fun thing to do. Today we're doing kind of a weird diagonal tasting because I have a different grape. I have the Marsanne from 2017, Church and State. Then I'm jumping to Roussanne for our 18 and 19. But I also have Roussanne from second chapter in 2017. So it's like I'm doing a vertical with the 17, 18, 19 Roussanne, except I'm visiting different vineyards to do it. So I'm all over the place. Which means I'm mostly just tasting this for fun. Okay, this is neat. This is fun. I like to try one grape from different producers because you get to see different facets of it, right? We did this when we talked about Syrah. We did this when we talked about Gamay Noir. This is something that, can be really educational, really informational, because I'm smelling this. And right away on this wine, I'm smelling a lot more lemon. I'm smelling citrus. And that is something that didn't exist in the same degree in the 2017 second chapter. Now, part of that can be because, good night, Orion. Good night. Go to bed. It's late. Sorry, that was my son saying good night in the chat right there. He's 5, so good night. Anyways, this right here is fun wine. Sorry, I totally lost the other thread of what I was talking about right there. Oh yeah, right. I'm getting more citrus on the nose of this as opposed to the second chapter, and that could also be because of the age, right? Your crisp, clean elements are going to be brighter. They're going to be fresher when the wine is younger. So this is 2018 Roussanne right here. So coming in a little bit crisper, a little more citrusy. Okay, this is really magnificent. This is wonderful. I'm so excited for all of you to be able to try this when eventually it is released to the public. Or if you're part of their wine club, go get a bottle right now, because this is really showing off again that wonderful quality of Roussanne, to be bright, to be crisp, but then to also have that rounded texture, right? Once again, this has a softness, this has a nuttiness, right? This is again a combination of newer oak and older oak. Fairly low proportion of new oak. You don't really need that much. You don't want to overwhelm it. But you know what? I said before that if you don't like oaked white wine, then you'll love these. But I should also say that if you do like oaked white wine, you'll probably still really like these because you'll be able to appreciate those nuances of oak that are creeping in here. You can see the fingerprint without it being overwhelming. For a oaked white wine drinker, this is the sort of wine that you show to your friends to try to get them interested in oaked white wines as well, because you can appreciate it and they can appreciate it. Magnificent. I get a peachiness on the palate there. I get stone fruit on the palate. That actually reminds me quite a bit of Viognier. That's sort of a Viognier trait that I don't necessarily equate with the Marsanne or the Roussanne as much, and so it's kind of neat to see that that sort of peach cream. Magnificent. 2018 Roussanne. Next, we move on to the 2019 Church and State Roussanne. They changed their label a little bit there. You see? Which one do you like? Do you like the small label, or do you like the big label there? Call it small and big, you know, the name's a little bit bigger. I think I like the big one. That's my assessment. I think it's bold. I think it's nice how it stands out. If it was on a shelf in a liquor store, Church and State wines they're sold liquor stores, sold at grocery stores in BC, sold at restaurants. You know, if you see this on a shelf, you know that would stand out. I also like the little stamp. They've put a little seal on now to identify the vineyard, so that kind of tells you that this is from the Bella vineyard. I don't know if you can see that in your camera there, but I like vineyard designation. I think vineyard designation is I think it's important. I think it's fun because it just helps the consumer understand more. I'm always a big proponent of people learning more about wine. And so vineyard identification, where you say exactly what vineyard this came from, you say what location the vineyard came from, it means, it's I've heard people say that it's about transparency, that it's proving that your grapes came from where they actually came from and not from some other, but I don't think it's about that. I don't think it's about transparency. I think that it's about information. When you say that your grapes are coming from the Bella vineyard, you understand a little bit about the terroir. Jennifer says that she likes the smaller label, and I say, get out, Jennifer. I like the big label. Anyways, it's about telling you about what a particular site is like. The golden ideal is that everybody who drinks British Columbia wine would start to learn and understand what it's like to have a vineyard in Oliver, what it's like to have a vineyard in Osoyoos, what it's like to have a vineyard in the Similkameen, or in Lillooet, or in Vernon, and you would start to understand and anticipate certain tendencies, and you would start to understand the different traits, and you would use that to inform your buying of a wine. That is my perfect world, a world where everybody understands the geography of BC, and they understand if they go to the liquor store that they can look at a wine and say, oh, this was grown in the Coyote Bowl vineyard, which is specifically on the east side of the highway, and it experiences this much heat, and it has sand, and so it's going to wind up being a hotter climate grape, and they're going to understand the way that influences the wine, that it's going to taste a certain way. Anyways, that's what I would like. Oh boy, this smells good. This is the 2019 Roussanne. Oh, I'm not used to tasting 5 wines, in the hour here. When I was doing Vinstitute classes in person, I would taste 6 wines across 2 hours. That's 3 wines an hour, right? That's 20 minutes per wine, and I would have remembered to bring my spittoon to that. So I think I'm going a little stir crazy here. Ooh. Man, this smells amazing. This is like a candied nose. The nose on this has such powerful tropical fruit. This actually reminds me quite a bit of the 2017 second chapter, how it had that sort of banana cream, a tropical tone to it, which is fascinating because on the nose, this wine from Church and State 2019 almost skips over the 2018 Church and State and goes back to the 2017 and actually smells more like a wine from a different producer. Anyways, it has this tropical ripe banana nose, but it's almost a bit like candy floss. There's this almost bubblegum sweetness to it there. Really, really nice. Wow, that smells delicious. I just realized that some people were standing below the window and watching me from the lobby. It's kind of funny because I have a vantage point right here to the restaurant. I'm just looking down into the restaurant. They were just people sitting there eating dinner, staring up at my back as I tasted wine. Wow, okay. The palate mirrors the nose. You get this impression of sweetness, of tropical, rich sweetness on the palate, but it isn't sweet. It does not have literal sweetness to it. You can tell that the residual sugar is quite low. And again, you can tell it has that little bit of acid because there's that little hint of brightness there. But boy, oh boy, it has this soft, really delicious tropical fruit tone that is almost like it's almost like bubblegum ice cream, on a banana split. This is delicious. This is really good. Wow. Okay, I did not expect that because this is, it's some traits that you would see in Roussanne, but it's in a way that you would not necessarily expect to see in Roussanne. So good on you, Arno, the winemaker. This is a real neat wine. So anyways, like I said, for everybody that is watching this, you can either wait until the 2019 Roussanne is released. It might be a couple of years, or you can join their wine club and you can get a bottle now, or find somebody who's part of their wine club and get that person to buy a bunch of the wine and then split it between you and them. That's don't tell Church and State I told you to do that. Just join their wine club. That's good too. All right, everybody. We have had a lot of fun for the last several months doing this live stream tasting series. Again, I'm pretending this is the mid-season finale, like we're going away on a break. We're literally going away for 7 extra days than we would normally be going away for, so that isn't really anything at all. But I am going to wrap up now. I want to thank everybody from the Oliver Associates Winery Association, all of the member wineries who contribute their wines for these tastings. This is just so much fun to be able to do. It's great to be able to try some wines that I love, that I am passionate about. Lariana has been one of my pet projects since they first opened up. I've been telling everybody that I meet to go to Lariana to try their wine. Did you know that they make Carmenere? Almost nobody makes Carmenere. They make Carmenere and they make it real good. So you should definitely go try Lariana. Church and State, one of our longtime favorites, and just such wonderful people working there, making such incredible wines. And Second Chapter, a new winery that is showing so much incredible promise right out of the gates that is just wowing and amazing everybody. And actually, if you want to learn more about Second Chapter, I would recommend that you listen to episode 6 of the podcast that I produced, Uncork the Sun with the Vinstitute Wine School, where I interviewed John Pullen, the founder and winemaker of Second Chapter. And during the recording of that audio, we are drinking this wine. So John and I are sitting there on the patio and drinking this exact Roussanne, the 2017 Roussanne, while we talk about second chapter. So if you really enjoyed listening, not just watching, but listening to me drink this wine right now on camera, you can listen to more by just going and getting that episode of the podcast, Uncork the Sun with the Vinstitute Wine School. Sometimes I talk to winemakers like John. Sometimes I just talk to myself about whatever I feel like. Doesn't that sound like fun to listen to? Anyways, thank you all, everybody. And thank you once again to Thai Namara Seaside Spa Resort and Conference Center for housing me for the past month. The next time that I do one of these tastings, who knows where I will be. We will talk to you then, and I believe the topic is going to be Cab Franc, which I am just rip-roaring excited about. So, until then, good night, everybody. Let's do the glass clink thing. I always forget to do that. So here I'm gonna. Okay, do you have your glass ready? I'm coming in. I know the frame rate's really bad, so you.